Well, good morning. Thank you for joining us on this beautiful Sunday morning. Man, we have had a heat spell, haven't we? But it's just about over. I think we're going to get to our beautiful fall weather here, not too far in the future. So Pastor Carl and I didn't record last week because we were in Hawaii enjoying our vacation. So I apologize for that, but it just gave us the weekend off. So it was a good break for us. But we're back at it and rested up and ready to go again. Just wanted to mention too, it wasn't so hard coming back this year. Usually I don't want to get back on that plane, but this year we got our number 10 grandchild on the way back. So it was okay to come home this time. So little Wells Samuel joined us. So we're pretty happy about that, pretty excited to get to go see him. Hopefully over the holidays we'll get to meet him. Just a couple of things to go over. Our men's group will be back on at 6:30 on Monday night here at the Father's house and on Zoom. Our ladies group will be meeting Thursday at 6:30 on Zoom. And next Saturday is our second Saturday volunteer to come and help clean up at the church. So if you want to be a part of that, we'd love to have you help us. This place is so hard to keep up. In fact, I looked around this morning and I noticed the cobwebs are all back because we've been gone for 9 days. So anyway, we'd love to have you join us. We'll be meeting here at the church at 10 o'clock, and we only spend a couple of hours, so it's not all day of your Saturday. But anyway, if you could come and help us, we'd really appreciate that. I wanted to mention too that tomorrow for Sunday, or today, whichever time you're watching it, we're going to be having a meal after church. So we'd love to have you come and join us if you'd like to be part of that. That's really all I have to cover today, so we'll turn the time over to Pastor Carl.
Well, good morning, Father's House. It's good to be with you. I should be saying aloha, since we're back from Hawaii, like Penny had just mentioned. And yeah, I'm glad to be back too. I'm kind of with her. It's like coming back this time wasn't as hard, knowing that we had a new grandchild on the way. Excited about that, number 10. So I got another little to play with and to run around with, and that's always a good time. Also, you can see I'm dressed in pink today. I went out and bought a pink shirt. I had to tell Penny that I just had to have this shirt. I didn't have to have it, but I wanted one. I wanted one last year, actually, for the month of October, because the month of October is National Breast Cancer Awareness Month. And I think it's important for us to support all people's efforts concerning breast cancer and other kinds of cancers as well. And so I have a sister that right now is in the middle of it. She's just kind of on the tail end of some long treatments for cancer, and things are looking good for her breast cancer. And so I want to wear this in solidarity for her. I also have another friend, Penny, and my friend, goes by the name of Lisa Marie, who is right now fighting with cancer. And she's a young girl, and this world is better off with her in this world than without her in this world. And she's one of the most beautiful people that I've ever met in her heart. And so we're hoping that she does well in her treatment. She's fighting a different type of cancer that's much more difficult to treat, and just want her to know that our prayers are with her, and our heart and our thoughts as well. So anyway, remember all those people, and if you can give money to a charity other than the church, and this month is to give it to breast cancer awareness or a cancer group that is looking for a cure to cancer. Any of us that have been touched by it, we know just how devastating it is. And so anything you could do would be appreciated. And who knows, maybe you'll be wearing pink tomorrow as well. Well, what else? I guess that's about it. We did have a great vacation, and looking forward to just getting back into saddle here of studying. I did get a lot of reading done. Some of my courses, Penny did as well. I got a project that's going to be due next week, and so a big project, and so I've got to really start constructing it. I've been studying for it and constructing it for one of my classes, but that's none of your concern, but it's going to start weighing on me on Monday morning. So I have to get started on that. What else? I guess that's about it. I want to kind of reiterate what we've been talking about here. We've been talking about, and I've been presenting before you, some different images of the church and images through the life of Jesus Christ. We kind of started off talking about that one of the images of Jesus Christ is that God sent him to explain the Father to us, that was why he came. And in explaining the Father to us, John 3:16, it says, "For God so loved the world that he gave his only begotten Son, that whoever should believe in him would not perish but have everlasting life." The second part, which becomes just as important, "For God did not send his Son into the world to condemn the world, but that through him the world might be saved." We also talked about that, so there's that image of Jesus explaining the Father to us. And then we've been talking about the image the last several months about las sobras and sobremesa, and the idea of those things that remain, or the leftovers out of the meal, or the superabundance of after we share in a meal and eat after a meal. And then what remains after, and the sobremesa is after the meal, our fellowship, this idea of community, of how much of Jesus' life was spent around the table, reclining at table with scribes and Pharisees and publicans, and all which are basically tax gatherers or people that were outcasts. And we see that food becomes such an interplay in the ministry of Jesus. And we're going to talk more about that. And we want to keep that the images of this table ministry of Jesus, and how for the Father's house that you find it in table ministry, that there you find the divine presence of God with us, because he said, wherever two or three are gathered in my name, there am I in their midst. And so we've talked about, as a congregation, how much we eat together, spend time together, have a meal together, whether it's a women's ministry, a men's ministry, or a Sunday morning here at the church, which incidentally, this Sunday, we're going to be having a meal again. So if you can come join us, church will start at 10, and our meal should be around 11:15 or so tomorrow. And so we've got some people preparing another meal that we can come and we can share together. So there's this idea of God explaining the Father to, or Jesus explaining the Father to us, as one that didn't come to judge the world, but that through him the world might be healed, it might be redeemed, it might be brought to a new dimension of life. And how important it is of Jesus to recline at table and to eat with his disciples, and the idea of the superabundance of God, that when God's community meets to minister to one another, God's superabundance is always present. We talked about that last week, 2 weeks ago. And we talked about that. We talked about the idea of the superabundance. You don't start with superabundance. You start with 2 fish and 5 loaves. And out of that, as you begin to break the loaf and distribute the fish, you don't only feed 5,000 people by the presence of Jesus Christ in your midst, but there's 12 baskets of superabundance left over from the 2 fish and the 5 loaves. And so today I kind of want to talk about, and we talked about last week, we talked about this image of Jesus being somewhat countercultural in 2 fronts. He's countercultural when he's dealing with the scribes and the Pharisees, and he's countercultural when he's dealing with religion and religious preferences, so to speak, and also in sometimes of dealing with society and the political norms of the time. And the idea that Jesus really, in some ways, transcends those natural bias or prejudice that we have sometimes, that are culturally implied or inferred upon us. And so Jesus kind of pulls himself back, or transcends past that, because he understands the ministry of the Father, and explaining the Father and explaining to him that he's got to challenge certain things in our thinking. In this case, it was the scribes and Pharisees, who the scribes and Pharisees were godly men. They really did try to follow God to the best of their ability, but that wasn't what Jesus was concerned about. He was concerned about their excess, when he wanted to put things that God didn't put on people, and he wanted to put those on other people. We also find that he's countercultural in the way that he dealt with the woman that was the woman at the well, that was a Samaritan that no one would talk to, in his encounter with that woman. Then we had another encounter with a woman that was caught in adultery that we talked about many months ago. Both of those we've talked about. And the woman that was caught in adultery, and how he ministered to her. And today I want to bring forward another pericope of a woman that I think explains the heart of God. So last week we left off with the fact that Jesus was talking about The scribes and Pharisees were mad because they didn't wash before they ate ceremonially. And the scribes and Pharisees came to Jesus and asked him, "Why do your disciples not wash their hands before they eat?" And Jesus said, you've got it all wrong. You think it's what goes into a man's mouth that defiles him. But really, at the end of the day, that's not the case, because those things are going to pass through your body. But what is the matter is that whatever comes out of the abundance of your heart, whatever you speak, whatever your actions are, those are the very things that either justify you or condemn you to some extent. So after this small encounter that he has with the scribes and Pharisees, and it's really kind of coming to the time at the end of his public ministry when this happens, is Jesus makes a very interesting travel event or a traveling journey with his disciples. So he leaves the area of Capernaum in Galilee where he is. He's going to travel up to near the Mediterranean Sea and up north into the area into the region of Decapolis, which was an area that you almost ask yourself, why did he go up there? Because Jesus, in making this move, he's pulling himself out of the center of the Jewish people, of Jewishness, and he's going up to this area of Tyre and Sidon that is technically a part of Israel. But at the same time, you have the Syrophoenicians that are up there, and they were Baal worshipers, and they were idol worshipers, and so it's almost there's like he's going to the fringe of where the Jews live and the start of where these community of idol worshipers live, which the Syrophoenicians, and they were people that weren't fully Jewish, and so it's this on the margins of society is where Jesus goes. And he's going to spend in that area, and he's going to travel to another area that's on the margins as well. And I think that there's some things here that Jesus wants to teach us by way of understanding that as much as we think that God is here for us, and I think as Christians, sometimes we think we're God's special people and that, we're God's elect people. God loves us, that God cares for us, and that somehow people that don't know him, it's like, well, you don't know God, you're going to hell, you're not saved, you can't have a relationship with God. And yet I think that in that we might miss the heart of Jesus when we see that Jesus is universal to all people, not just the Jewish people. Now, it is true that he came for the Jewish people in this instance during this ministry. But as we're going to find out later, eventually they reject him entirely. We're going to see that a little bit later in the life of Jesus. But that rejection is really already there in the scribes and Pharisees. So he travels to this marginal area, to this fringe area where Israel meets this blurred line with this pagan culture that is not a part of the Jewish culture and really doesn't ever intend to be. He has an encounter with a woman. So we're going to pick up the story.
Sorry, I didn't understand that.
I didn't either, but that's okay. There's Siri. She didn't understand, so we're going to have to let her go with that. So we're going to go into the Gospel of Matthew, kind of where I left off. And 2 weeks ago, so we're going to be in Matthew chapter 15, and we're going to pick up a short story here on Matthew 15, verse 21. Jesus went away from there and withdrew into the district of Tyre and Sidon, which was, like I said, this marginal area. So it would almost be maybe synonymous with what's going on in our borders, the borders between us and Mexico, and there's that no man's land that's kind of in between with people wanting to come across the borders, and there's just almost an indistinction on both sides of the borders of who's who and where they're from, and etc. So it would be an area very similar to that. And it says that a Canaanite woman, who again was a worshiper of Baal, more than likely, a Canaanite woman from that region came out and began to cry out, saying, "Have mercy on me, Lord, son of David. My daughter is cruelly demon-possessed." But he did not answer her. And his disciples came and implored him, saying, "Send her away, because she keeps shouting at us." But he answered and said to her, "I was sent only to the lost sheep of the house of Israel." But she came and began to bow down before him, saying, Lord, help me. And he answered and said, It is not good to take the children's bread and throw it to the dogs. But she said, Yes, Lord, but even the dogs feed on the crumbs which fall from their master's table. Then Jesus said to her, O woman, your faith is great. It shall be done for you as you wish. And her daughter was healed at once. Departing from there, Jesus went along the Sea of Galilee, and he moves forward in a different direction. So I want to kind of pick up this story about what begins to happen in the life of Jesus when he's up in this area of Tyre and Sidon. So again, this woman probably has heard something about Jesus and about the ministry of Jesus and the ability that he has the ability to heal. And so she's not a part of the house of Israel. Now, Jesus said he was sent to the people of the Abrahamic covenant, the people of Israel, the nation of Israel. And so he's at this border of no man's land, and this woman comes to him, and her daughter is afflicted. And he comes, and I notice what she says, Son of David, have mercy on me, because my daughter is afflicted. She's afflicted with something, a mental illness, a demon, probably something along those lines, which is probably a mental illness, and Jesus being able to touch the mind and heal the mind. And Jesus, at first he ignores her, and part of that was, it was like, I think he was waiting to see, number one, what her response would be, but number two, maybe even what his disciples' response would be. So his disciples kind of reacted in the same way that they reacted, if you recall, with the Samaritan woman at the well, when they were somewhat offended that he would be talking with a woman, but Jesus initiated the conversation with that woman at the well, and he was a little bit disturbed or a little bit irritated by the fact at the hardness of their heart on pushing that woman away and almost even, rebuking Jesus to some extent for talking with her. So we kind of have the same thing where it says, send her away. She's annoying. She has no right to talk to us. We're Jews, and here she is, this Canaanite poor woman, and she's got a daughter that's got an affliction, and it doesn't even appear that the daughter's even there. And so here she is. She's coming, and she's begging for you. And Jesus, after hearing them say, send her away, he initiates a conversation with this woman, which I love. The same minute he initiates a conversation with the woman at the well, he initiates a conversation with a woman that is even probably a dog, or would be considered a dog, even more than a Samaritan would. And he looks at her and he says, it's not good to give the children's bread, to the dogs. And she comes and she implores him, and she bows down before him, and she says, and she makes a theological point here. And she says, yes, Lord, but aren't even the dogs allowed the scraps from the master's table? Okay, and at that point, Jesus is looking at her, and he understands what it is that she's saying theologically. So here's the point. So let's think about it in these scenarios, but maybe even in your own families. Now, I know that that our society has become a lot more health conscious in the way that we treat our pets and our animals. I mean, heck, you can spend more on dog food, for the week than you spend on yourself for the week, because you want your dog, you love your dog, you want your dog to eat healthy, so you want your dog to eat organic foods, and you pay that kind of money, and you buy all the special stuff for them, and so it becomes very expensive. But I remember growing up, and especially I think if you live in an agrarian society, like if you were to live maybe up in Idaho or in other places where there's a lot of farming going on, and dogs are used or ranching, and dogs are used for utilitarian purposes, that and for my family, it was true even for my pets, and I know it's probably true for a lot, is that we would all sit down and eat our meal together, and at the end, there would always be these scraps that we didn't eat, whether we were children or the adults, right? So if you had a steak, maybe you're taking, or maybe a pork chop, you cut off the fat cap, you're not going to eat the fat cap, and maybe there's a little bit of meat on it, and maybe you don't eat all the meat, but there's not enough meat worth saving. And so after the meal, what happens is whoever it is cleaning up, they take those chunks, they cut it up, they put it in a bowl, and they feed it to the dogs. And so the dogs then are able to eat the scraps from the master's table. Now, it's interesting here, and this is the theological point that she's making, and it's brilliant, but it's brilliant because I think in her desperation, she's not going to let Jesus go. And so this is kind of what in her argument she's saying. So she says, Lord, my daughter is inflicted, and I know that you can heal her. He says, I'm not sent to you. I'm only sent to the house of Israel. And she comes and says, she implores him more, saying, but Lord, just please give me something for my daughter. I don't want her to suffer the way that she's suffering. And he says, why would I take the children's bread and give it to the dog? And she says, but wait a minute here. I'm not asking for the children's bread. I'm not asking you to take anything away from them. What I'm asking for is, now get this, out of the superabundance of what you provide for your people, the only thing that I'm asking for is the scraps that they're not going to eat. When they're all satisfied and they're filled and they walk away from the table, everything else that's left on that table, the fat that's left over, the small portions of meat that they didn't eat, they're either going to be thrown away or they're going to be fed to the dogs. So in the same way that you would consider us to be dogs, feed us, or feed me, the same way you would feed a dog at the master's table. Jesus understood, looking at her, and he marveled at her because he understood that she understood that in his superabundance, that he had the ability to heal her. And in healing her, he didn't have to take anything away from anybody else to touch her. He didn't have to deprive anybody in his superabundance of her. And he looks at her and he simply says, woman, you are a woman of great faith. There is no way that I could deny you for saying that. Because I'm a superabundant God and I understand him to be my Father to be superabundant, that I want you to go. I want you to be filled and I want you to be satisfied. Because I didn't have to take something from somebody else and give it to you, but I can give you the scraps, which incidentally are as boundless as the provision I give for anybody else. Because of your faith, because you understand that, and my goodness and my superabundance, I want to tell you something. Go, because your faith has saved your daughter. The woman went away, and she found out when she got there that her daughter was restored to her right mind. Now, that's an interesting story. It's interesting because it happens outside of the faith community of Israel. If he was sent to the community of Israel to heal in that land, in that people, that particular ethnic group, then what's happening here is you see Jesus again being countercultural. He's touching the margins. He's going out to the margins. He's not just worried about the center, but he's worried as much about the people on the margins that don't know him or wouldn't be permitted into that culture. They simply weren't allowed into the culture. Unless they converted, they could be a foreigner, but they could never be considered an ethnic Jew. Jesus went out and said, I don't care that you'll never be considered one of the children of Abraham we're talking about in this instance, but you're still my child because I'm the seed of Abraham and I can provide for you if you'll participate with me. The thing that makes this story so profound was this woman was simply able to say, I don't know what you want to give them, God. I don't know what you want to do with their people. But I know this, Jesus, you're good. And because of your good, I don't even have to have that. I can be content just to have the scraps on the master's table. Would you allow me to have that? Sometimes you don't feel like you're good enough. You don't feel like you're worthy enough for God to care or to love or to take care of you. And yet that's just simply not true. All that it takes for us is to come to Jesus humbly and ask and simply say, I'm willing to take whatever you give me, Lord. You don't have to take what you're giving to other people and give it to me. I know that you can provide for them, and I'm willing to accept anything you would give me. But you see, it takes our participation. It takes us to be willing to ask. It takes us to be willing to persevere and to keep on asking when we don't get those things. And also to come to God humbly, knowing that he didn't come to judge the world, but that through him, the world might be restored. I hope today you'll say yes if you find yourself in a situation where you or a family member needs the touch of God, needs a healing in your family. that you'll begin to just come to Christ in any situation and simply say, Lord, help. I need your help. Have mercy on me. And I think that what you'll find in the midst of that, you'll find God's superabundance for your life. Well, I hope this speaks to you. I know it's short, and I know it's, kind of an interesting story, but I think if you think about it, you'll see how big this story is of the woman who was satisfied with the scraps from the master's table. God bless you, and have a great day.